Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Pillowtalk podcast. And this week we have a very special guest for you. But before that, I think what we need to address is what happened in the past 2 weeks. In the past 2 weeks, we saw a major social media uproar towards something called the boys' locker room, essentially, a group of children, mostly underage, who were talking about women who were very clearly objectifying women on an on an Instagram group. We saw Snapchat, text rooms, and everything, and all of that brought us into conversation about how we, since a very early age, have contributed a lot to stuff like this, to the rape culture. We have been complicit, and if not complicit, we've also even propagated it to a certain extent. And that made us delve into further conversations about how we can do better, how the society can do better, and basically what we can learn from this whole situation.
Yeah, and I think I speak for all of us. I mean, I'm not trying to generalize or anything, but this is at least what happened with me. Like the first time that I read about what was happening, the first time I got to know, my first reaction was anger. And it was anger that, turned into frustration because at that very moment, the amount of avenues that you have to do something about it or to be able to, correct what has happened are very few.
Hmm.
And in after a while, after you've thought about it, after you've had time to look at an aggregate picture of what's happening, I realized that I have been complicit to this a similar culture, similar practices for a very long time. And that is what prompted me and Manan to make sure that this time it wasn't just us talking to you about what happened, which is why Manan, like Manan mentioned, we have a very special guest with us today. She is the founder and director of Super School India, which is an NGO that's based out of Delhi. They work with underprivileged urban children with a primary focus on sex education, bad touch, good touch, sex practices, and sexual taboos. I've actually had the privilege of working with her before when she came on as a speaker for TEDx Shivnagi University in 2019. Her name is Radhika Mittal, and Radhika, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi Jay, hi Manan. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Very excited. So I'm Radhika, and as you guys have already very nicely introduced, I'm the director and founder of Super School, and our work is primarily in sex ed. And I really think once you kind of get into sex ed, that kind of becomes your whole life because if you are at the forefront promoting sex ed, it really requires everybody who's a facilitator or a team member to kind of look into their own lives as well. And which is why I always say that sex ed is like my entire life. And honestly, there's literally nothing more I can say about myself apart from the fact that I like chai as well, which also somehow I've managed to include within sex ed, which is our very popular chai analogy, which by the way we didn't create. We took inspiration from a British blogger. But yeah, somehow I've taken everything about my life and sort of included it into sex ed. Yeah.
So I think the first question right off the bat, I have to ask you, what was your initial reaction to the whole situation that happened on the internet 2 weeks ago?
Honestly, I just switched off. It was, because of our work, we are surrounded by all of, and I mean, boys locker room happened. It was horrific. I wasn't surprised. I was
Hmm.
not surprised because we've this one came out, this one somehow was exposed, but we've been privy to this for as long as I've been in this field. So this one just, the luck of the boys sucked, and it just happened to get leaked, right? But I don't think anybody should fool themselves by thinking that this was the only one. There are
Right.
currently, despite the consequences, currently many other such chats out there in their own in their own platforms, right? Not just online. I think just even gatherings. Sometimes even house parties, we get together, and it's just so easy for us to objectify, um, or just make small of very serious matters. So, kind of boys' locker room exists everywhere. So, when it first happened and I found out about it, my reaction was, oh my God, I just can't deal with this. Because I knew I would have friends and everybody kind of reaching out to me, kind of going like, dekha tune, and or maybe expecting me to put up something on my Instagram stories or on Super School's official page. and
Yeah.
I was sitting with the social media team, and we were sitting and we were so jaded. We were so jaded. We just think like it just doesn't stop. And we understood why this was happening, right? Because we literally deal with it all the time. That was my first reaction. And then my second reaction was, well, there's really nothing more we can do than we're already doing as an organization. But it just, kind of gave us like that. Because sometimes you get a little tired. You're like, oh my God, working in India is like such a pain.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get like this little bit of a boost, right? Okay, like, no, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is
Right.
why. I mean, not like we need reminders in India. The reminders are there like
Yeah.
all the time. But the fact that we work with youth, um, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, since you are so heavily involved in an industry which, revolves around such issues, I'm sure it must have been much more tiring and much more exhausting for you than it was for us. And even then, I remember having a conversation with Manan only, where I think this was a day after the entire episode happened. And our discussion was also based on the fact that, I think I just need to delete Instagram for a few days because there was so much information, there were so many arguments going on at the same time, and it just felt like a lot to take in, absorb, and then respond to at just one moment of time without having enough to build on. Which also, after we had time to think about it, the one question which popped into our minds immediately was, where or how much of a role do you think the lack of sex education in our country has to do with this? And this question I'm asking both in terms of the school's involvement, because sex ed has been absent from the academic curriculum for as long as we've been in school, and second, the absence of these discussions in your houses with your parents. How do you think that plays a role into the entire scandal that happened?
I think it plays a very big role. I kind of also, and I'm just not saying that because that's my bread and butter, but I genuinely think it plays one of the most important roles, if not the most important. And I'll tell you why. It's because very quickly, rape culture is created by multiple different things. And as the word culture says, it's something we're surrounded by, right? So we kind of
Mhm.
like subconsciously or consciously pick up certain things from it, and then it kind of translates into our behavior. And the behavior can sometimes be within the bound. It can be immoral but not illegal, and sometimes in more serious matters it's immoral and illegal.
Right.
So me kind of going like maal lag rahi hai, ठीक है.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It may be, it's definitely immoral, but depending on the context or whatever, it may not be illegal. Whereas if me saying that while molesting somebody, that goes into illegal as well. So what happens is that you can't run away from culture na? I mean, unless we kind of go into the root of what caused this culture, which would mean I'll have to get in touch with like Karan Johar and like Varun Dhawan and all these people. um, you can't do anything about the culture. So what do? We need to have the tools to be able to take the correct things from the culture, or to be able to look at it critically. So what sex ed does, or the sex ed comes in over here. Sex ed gives you the tools, opens up your mind to be able to now look at everything you're consuming a little bit more critically, so that you can continue to consume it but not let it affect you or affect your behavior. So when I um, when I started really learning about sex ed myself because of work, I everything else, I was so many things that I was a passive consumer of, and it was causing me to behave a certain way towards certain genders. I started looking at it critically, and I was embarrassed of myself. I couldn't believe that I lived the first 25 years of my life like that. um, So this is where schools come in. I was just so, I was so angry. I was like, mere school ne mujhe kyun nahi diya yaar? I mean, they took so much fees. I was like, you could have given sex ed. um but no, they took us to, I don't know what all parks and what not, and made us stand in assemblies in the heat, and made us sing all these bhakti songs and like give us sex ed. Had we been given sex ed, we could have had the tools to know how to deal with a breakup. We could have had the tools to not slut shame, victim blame.
Hmm.
We could have had so many tools, but we didn't have that. So schools that do not understand the importance of sex ed even now are denying their children a very essential piece of education.
Right.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
Moving on to homes. Homes, I don't blame homes too much. I genuinely don't, in terms of very obvious sex ed कि अगर parents बहुत obviously sex ed नहीं दे रहे, I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't get very fussed about that, because parents themselves are trying to, they come from a different generation. They're also,
Hmm.
and they may not be the best providers of sex ed. I also
Right.
believe that who gives sex ed is as important as the subject matter itself. Um, so I don't get too fussed about that. But what I do believe that at home there is something called like everyday sex ed, the very not obvious part of sex ed. Now, just say how you see your father treat your mother, for example.
Right.
That's a huge way of learning about a big component of sex ed, which are gender roles and gender respect. So I think this is where parents can really step in and be like, hey, maybe we need to look at our behavior towards each other and see what our children are learning.
Yeah, and
So,
I think, yeah, go on.
yeah, that's, yeah,
So I think you've nailed it at that, because once you talk about institutionalizing something, you make it extremely formal, right? Because
exactly.
once if you're expecting it to come out of the household, which I won't lie, I earlier thought that was the way to go forward with it, but you have to realize that once you have that subjectivity between
Correct.
households, and how different people approach different situations, and how different people have different households, and not everyone, like you said, is in a place to give a good piece of education to their child. I
Yeah,
think that's where the subjectivity comes in, and that is where institutionalizing the whole thing becomes very important. And I
correct.
think which brings me to the next question is, should we blame schools for whatever happened, or just like everyone else, they are complicit to whatever happened?
I don't think we can do a blame game right now, as much as I would
Hmm.
love to, honestly. I don't think we can. Because the school will say, oh, it's not our fault, it's the parents, I mean, how do we control what they say? And the next thing they'll probably start pulling out report cards of the boys involved and be like, well, a school is supposed to, like, look at their marks, it's so good. I don't know, like, I think it's just going to be a little bit of like a slippery slope if we kind of go into that.
Hmm.
But I think now, because this case has become so, it's like mainstream media,
Hmm.
um, I think from here on out, especially the privileged schools, um, ought to start considering sex education, not from the sanskari point of view, but from the factual point of view.
Right.
And I think now, yes, what's going to happen is that now, if similar things start happening, the blame game will start. That वो हुआ,
Hmm.
आपने फिर भी action नहीं लिया. I think that's what's going to start happening. But I think as of now, I don't think we ought to blame schools also, because yeah, government से कोई mandate नहीं है. Oh, what reason do they have, right? And plus, I know for a fact, because I've spoken to management of private schools, and they're genuinely worried. They're like, our parents will come and kill us. कि हमने sex ed introduce kara, parents will just be like, no, you can't talk to our children about this. They're gonna like, why is my son attending a workshop on menstruation? Malab, they're not going to see that the son is there in the world because the mother menstruated in the first place. Like, मेरे बेटों को क्यों बिठाया आपने menstruation workshop में? Like, schools also have a big stress on their heads. कि हम
Right.
introduce करेंगे तो we're going to have so much backlash from parents. So I guess then here parents also become a stakeholder, that parents also need to understand and demand from the schools that if you yourself are uncomfortable talking to your children, then let the school do it. So yeah, I think schools ought to now sit with parents and start having this conversation about, hey, is it time that we stop ignoring this?
Yeah, and I think so. The thing is that, the more we look at the entire episode, the more, at least it makes me realize, is that, there is a very blatant uh, absence, or, the very fact that people are not willing to take responsibility for their actions is prevalent here. And I think that's where both schools and parents come in, where they need to make sure that, this is what happened. Fine, we need to take accountability for it, and we need to make sure that we do what needs to be done to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future.
Yeah,
And that, I felt, has been missing with all the people who've been outed on Instagram,
mm,
who've been, called out on various social media sites.
yeah,
And I just drawing back to a point that you made previously, where you spoke about the entertainment industry.
yeah,
So there is a very blatant rape culture promotion when you look at, say, Bollywood,
yeah.
or more importantly when you look at the hip hop or the rap industry.
Hmm.
And consumption of both of these forms of media is rampant, like especially in a time like this when people don't have much to do.
Correct,
They are watching, old movies, they are listening to whatever music comes out.
correct.
How do you think that consumption can be moderated, or how can that delivery of media be changed, if it can be at all?
Delivery of media be changed, like I said, very tough. What are you going to do, yaar? I mean, the director of Kabir Singh literally came out and said, what's a relationship if not a little violent? I mean, when you're working with that mindset, what are you what are you gonna do? And I mean, I don't even know how much Kabir Singh earned, right? And um, there's very little, unless somebody's connected, that we can do when it comes to the actual media being put out there. I don't know what the censor board is doing. I mean, they can start putting, they'll start censoring out sex, which is a physiological need. But they how about, I mean, Tapsi Panu came up with an excellent suggestion, and I hope it gets implemented. Where, how when in movies there comes a warning, a health warning when there's a smoking scene.
Mhm.
So she suggested after the movie Thappar that there should be a warning, a legal warning, whenever there's a depiction of domestic violence. So whenever domestic violence is being depicted in a movie, there should be, like, IPC iske IPC section iske tahat ye crime hai. And
Right.
I was like, that's brilliant. Can you imagine the subliminal effect of that year on year, movie on movie? Sometimes it's something as small as that. Um, and I think, like, once that starts happening, right, when movie directors and script writers know that bhai is scene pe to marital rape likha aa jayega niche, they themselves would be like, ah, crap, like, let's start looking at our scripts, and what are we
Mhm.
doing? Right now there are literally zero checks. And I actually don't know if ये censor board का काम है. I should read up on it, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, so unless that starts happening, we can't expect much change in the actual content. Um, so then it all sort of boils down to us, and
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think just a very small observation that I had the other day, where I was looking at one of the old songs from 1980s or 1990s,
Mm,
where a scene where a guy kisses a girl without the consent,
mm,
right?
mm.
And just a small comment on YouTube which said ki, oh my god, this was the cutest thing in the video. And my with about 10,000 likes on that comment,
What?
that made me feel so stupid about how we've been nurtured in a way where we think non-consensual kissing is
Yeah,
actually cute and not something that we need to deal with,
yeah,
right? And this has been coming on from generations and generations. Like, if you go on to the generation above us and you talk to our parents, this
yeah,
has been there's in a lot of the movies as well. And like, just to reinstate my point, and my further question to you is, why do you think there hasn't been enough development in this? Like you said, the schools have a lot of stress when it comes to sex ed,
Hmm.
but the same, I don't think the same goes for movies. Like, okay, even if we talk in a very crude capitalistic sense, I
Hmm.
think this is one avenue where you can make a lot of money. If you don't want to do it for the morals, do it for the money. Like we saw in Thappad, it had a very strong message in it, right?
How much did it earn?
If I think it grossed very well on the
How much?
box office.
How much did it earn compared to Kabir Singh?
Yeah,
How
I
much did
think
it?
I think I think that's where the problem
How
lies.
much did it? How much did it earn compared to Dabang? So,
Hmm.
what's happening is that I'm sorry, Tapsi Pannu, I adore you, but your A-listers are not making great movies. Yeah, our A-listers are making like I haven't seen a movie in a while by one of these usual suspects. But I feel like even watching the trailer just kills my brain cells. And but that's it's being made, everybody's watching it, and I don't want to make it a class thing. Sometimes people come and tell me, हाँ but masses तो यही देखते हैं. I'm like, hello, mask क्या, मेरे सारे दोस्त गए हैं देखने. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, it's really not a class thing. It's just, I don't know whether we just want to watch brainless shit now. I don't know what it is, but it's your movies of quality and content are not grossing. Maybe Padman did, but that's also because you're Akshay Kumar. But Akshay
Right.
Kumar in itself is such a problematic character, and like because his representation and the kind of other movies he's done, he's such a problematic actor as well. So then that's another dilemma I face. I'm like, when problematic actors make good movies, like what do you do? And I guess that's the problem that comes with being so aware about this, especially in this field, is like you have a problem with everything. I but that I don't know whether the Bollywood industry, yes, it's starting, it's going in that direction.
Hmm.
But it's one it's sorry to make this a gender thing. Actually, I'm not sorry because it is. Um, your female leads tend to make more of such movies. But then check out what happens, right? Deepika Padukone made a movie on acid attack. She went to the JNU thing, didn't
Yeah.
utter a word, was standing on the boundary. People started boycotting this one, the movie. They started boycotting a
Right.
very important movie. People in my extended family, literally on the family group, started saying, "Did you see she went there?" When everybody don't watch the movie. And initially, when I read that, I was like, "Acha, is it because it's so traumatic?" Because the first message that came in the group was, "People, please don't watch Chapak, okay?" And I was like, "Oh shit, बहुत traumatic होएगी, मैं कैसे देखूंगी?" And then the next message that came was, "She went to JNU." And I'm like, "You're people with daughters and sons. How are you? Where is the So it's really is quite sad that um, the complete ignorance levels right now are through the roof, and
Right.
everybody who's trying it's really a tough battle.
And I think that brings us into a new conversation about how social media can be used as a way to mobilize the masses, and how that can be like we saw in another case after the boys locker room, which was not actually related to it, but we saw another case where a guy was accused of stuff
Hmm.
like of certain activities that he did. To
Yeah,
this day we don't know whether it happened or not, and we'll never know. Why?
yeah,
Because the person committed suicide and there will be no legal proceedings on it now. We
yeah,
won't know what the truth is.
yeah,
So where do you think is a perfect distinction between mobilizing social
yeah,
media towards the cause and
yeah,
the other side of defamation?
yeah. The first thing is, just don't be a troll, I guess. There is actually not a fine line. I'll say that is actually a pretty broad line between being constructive on social media and being a troll. So what
Hmm.
happened in this very unfortunate case that you just mentioned was, um, people started blaming the girl that you ruined the guy's life. You shouldn't have outed him on social media. Outing somebody, the word outing in itself is wrong. So that's
Right.
how she chose to finally share her trauma. uh, which we don't know whether it's true or not, but she chose to share it, right? What people started doing was they
Right.
started trolling. Now, constructive way of doing this would have been, hey, this girl has come out and said this. Um, just don't go and attack that boy. Like, why are you? Random strangers started going and dropping him messages.
Yeah.
Like, why? That's so illogical, you know? So, people, when somebody makes an accusation, I think our problem, because we suddenly have social media with us, our problem is we feel like हमें reaction देना है कि हमने reaction नहीं दिया तो हम हुए कैसे, what are we doing with our life? So we have to give a
Right.
reaction. So either we'll victim blame, either we'll just go like, why are you saying now? Or we'll go to the other extreme and we'll be like, why did you do this? You suck. You're an asshole. And that's pretty much what they did to that underage boy. They started trolling him and they started bullying him and harassing him and didn't even give that guy the time to process what had just happened. And so I think the first thing we need to do is understand that we don't always have to give a reaction and take our time, pause, absorb, let the legal world and the current systems in place do their work. And let's not take the law in our own hands. And
Right.
maybe just take this time to talk about the bigger matter over here. So let's not go into attacking either the accuser or the accused. Let's just take our time and like take a step back and go and look at the themes, right? So themes over here could be how much time it takes a survivor to actually come and share their trauma. So take a step back and just be like, start wondering, why does it take so much time, you know and then maybe have conversation on that. Maybe what's troubling you is that you didn't like the way that the girl came and put it on social media. So without personally attacking her, maybe just take a step back and be like, why is it that she felt the need to come on social media and do this? Was there something, um, so start wondering about these things, because that's when it becomes constructive. That's when we start to look at what's actually the problem in our society. And I don't think people are doing that. People are just like, insta story pe kya dale hum.
And I think a lot of what you are saying is actually true, because most of the people who are sharing all of this stuff, they're doing it to get a tick in their own checklist कि अच्छा मैंने ये भी share कर दिया, ये भी share कर दिया, ये भी share कर दिया. Now I can be accepted in
I'm
society.
woke.
And yeah, you're woke then. So I think that is the problem, that everyone tends to or has to or wants to react to whatever news they're getting in real time.
Yeah.
Like they will not wait for a proper picture to be put in front of them, a news article to be put. I mean, of course, consumption of news is also problematic now, but what I'm trying to say is that you need to make sure that you have all the facts before you go on you know giving death threats to somebody, or start telling someone that what you're saying is wrong, you're just making this up in your mind.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that this brings me to, is that as soon as the boys locker room incident happened, as soon as the screenshots started doing the rounds,
Hmm.
one thing that all of us started saying was this hashtag saying not all men.
Hmm.
And that, so again, I'm speaking very personally, that angered me, because this just again is a guy's attempt to discredit what's happening.
Not just
Like no
boys.
one's
Not just
yeah,
boys. Uh,
exactly, no one's pointing at you and saying that you did it, but it is people that you are around, they did that. And if you can't accept that, then that's a problem with you as well. So how do you think the social media backlash, the social media hashtags,
hmm.
how do you think they play into the entire culture, the entire episode that took place?
It used to really bother me at the start. Like, what, not all
Hmm.
men. But now I feel like,
Hmm.
now, whenever on Super School India's page, when somebody comments something, we actually did like this really fun post. Okay, fun, I shouldn't say that word. Very enlightening post on, we took a bunch of Bollywood songs, no, the movie scenes, and then, we really pointed out the problem with them. And one of the, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. It's called the Bhai Bhai Boy Band. It's this one guy came and he commented something along the lines of not all men. And the next thing you know, you had a whole bunch of men just coming and commenting on his reply, going like, भाई सही कहा भाई, उसने मेरा दिल तोड़ा था 3 साल पहले, लड़कियां are not innocent यार, you know. And then like 10 comments. I mean, super school की पूरी history में इतने comments नहीं आए हैं. And I was like, definitely, you know. And then the team also kind of was like, what do we do? What do we do? And even I was flustered. Then I was like, okay, you know what? It's fine. At least if this post is smoking them out, at least we can start engaging with them in discussion. So
Right.
I really didn't. I think if we start looking at it from that point of view now, that really helps. So it took all types of chanting and Zen and Buddhism to not lose our cool. But I think once you kind of like just breathe and go like, okay, this is why we are here. This is why we are here. I mean, you and I talking. I know you guys are, not all me. You're feminists, and you're not scared of the word feminist. So
Right.
हम तीनों बात कर रहे हैं. It's like we're sitting in a bubble and talking to each other. So if nobody listens to this podcast, it's like क्या फायदा था इसका? The entire point of this is if the not all men hashtag people listen to this, then फायदा हुआ इसका. So if something can smoke them out, then great, why not?
Yeah, and I think what angered us about hashtag not all men was, okay, fine, but don't get it involved into a completely different topic, because that is literally taking away from the conversation that is supposed to come first. Like, we have to talk about this first. Your not all men can be secondary, or just take it to another place, because that's not necessary right now. And then your videos of people making videos around how men have like how there have been wrongful allegations against men, and
Hmm.
people have blatantly reposted it on Instagram without looking into facts about, even if there have been wrong accusations, you have to realize how many people are yet to come out. Like, there are
Yeah,
still so many unreported cases in India, and you're saying that, oh my god, 53% were false accusations. And
yeah,
false accusations on the basis of what? Like,
yeah,
they had to retract their cases because the men were saying that they would kill the family, they would bully
yeah,
the woman. People had to, and it's so shattering to see how people how people as educated as us, and how people who've seen all of this happen can react in a completely different way, and can
yeah.
react to situations completely different. So my final question to you is, how do you think we can go forward from this now?
Um, I think that we have to start looking at um, the fact that, firstly, hashtag not all men and all similar arguments, where if not they're actually not applicable anywhere. I can't imagine a single scenario right now where where that hashtag is applicable, except for if somebody comes and says all men are rapists.
Right.
Only then will it be acceptable if someone comes and says hashtag not all men. So I
Right.
think the first thing is to see that इसका applicability कहीं नहीं है.
Hmm.
And there's this one analogy that we often give in our workshops, and I often give at house parties. Oh my God. I'm surprised my friends are still my friends. But uh, one of the analogies that if you're sitting at a pool, right? Some people are lounging, some kids are running around, some people are swimming, and the lifeguard says, "Hey, you, stop running!" Right? And then do the people that are lounging or otherwise generally being safe get enraged and turn to the lifeguard and say, but मैंने तो कुछ नहीं किया? Nobody says that, right? Because the people who are lounging and being safe know that the lifeguard is simply referring to the people who are being careless around the pool.
Right.
So we know that. So when the movement comes out and says that generally, there is a toxic masculinity culture amongst boys and men. I think the first thing we need to understand is that when somebody says that, nobody's attacking you personally. So why does somebody feel attacked? If somebody feels attacked, is it because there's a guilty conscience over there?
Hmm.
So I think firstly we just need to understand कि हम इतना offend क्यों हो जाते हैं. and really understand that. And I think just going really just like wrapping this up, it would be that a lot of us who might be listening to this may not actually have the opportunity to go to the grassroots and make a difference, right? Because I think we're going to be caught in the rat race or whatever. But nobody really needs to go to the grassroots. I think you just kind of have to look inward at our own behavior and our own mindset. And and I really wish I had a more manly voice, because I feel like nobody really wants to hear a woman say all of this. But so maybe you could just repeat, after I'm done, say the same points. I think some people might be just more inclined to accept those points then. But like there's just so many things that we can start looking at. And I did a post on it on my Instagram. It was one of like those 2 a.m. super frustrated with life. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna put out a post. And it was about like what we do on a daily basis. And
Hmm.
we victim blame. What does that sound like? And these are all things that contribute to rape culture. And not just men. I really kind of mean that even women. I've done it, yeah. And then we victim blame. We kind of go like,
Right.
"Acha, tumhe kya zarurat thi, yaar? I read a report. Can you believe it? How it basically it was a completely skewed report on how clothing actually causes rape." And and then we slut shame. We've all done it, yeah. Oh, देखा उसने
Right.
उसकी उसका ब्लाउज कितना छोटा था. Dude, that's slut
Right.
shaming. That's literally slut. She can wear whatever the hell she wants. And
Hmm.
there's so many other things we do. We just don't realize that that's contributing to rape culture. So I think after all of this, I just would really think that just young people, right, who are just going to kind of grow up to take on positions of leadership, and should really start looking at their own behavior and their own mindsets. And I really want to speak out to the women too. I think I've had to really change myself as well. Um, because I realized I had such massive hypocritical double standards. So I want to be to kind of have to think about um, our own behavior too. And I'm saying this because I guess it's a little bit more acceptable coming from a woman, but I really hope that women would be okay if it came from a man as well. So we really want this feminist movement going forward. But what is this whole thing about expecting your date to pay? And if the date doesn't pay, then it's like, oh, he didn't even offer to pay. And I think, oh my god, we really need to undo that conditioning. um, and at the same time, then don't go the other end now. A wife should pay. Yeah, but wife doesn't earn, how can she pay? So it's context dekho. And so I really think we need to just sort of start looking at our own behavior, really understand what gender equality
Right.
is, really understand what rape culture is. And then once we've understood it, really properly understood it, then automatically social media activism will become a lot more refined and a lot more constructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to give everyone proper information. So, like you mentioned, Thappad did 21 crores at the box office, and Dabang did 210 crores. So that's a
Right.
10 times jump.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think, the way that you've concluded, the trajectory forward from your is sort of a perfect way to do it. And I think that's where we'll end the podcast today. If so, like with all other podcasts, if there are any questions or if there's anything, that we might have missed out on, or you think that what we said doesn't accurately depict what's happening, then you can reach out to us. And if you want to reach out to Radhika, then Radhika, can you please tell them where they can do that?
Sure. You can contact us on our Instagram page, which is Super School India. Is that how you say it? At Super School India? Yeah.
Yeah, and that is all for today. We'll be back with new episodes soon, and we just want to thank you guys for tuning in weekly to our podcast, and that's all. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It
Yeah.
was fun.
Bye.